Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Chris Dost. Welcome back to my series on the textual analysis of the Hebrew Bible. Today, we're going to begin our discussion on Genesis chapter 1. But before we begin, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, click the bell below to be notified when future videos are published, and please be sure to share this video on social media and to leave a comment below. I really appreciate the support. All right, let's get started. Recently, I have had some people ask me questions about how to interpret the first word in the Hebrew Bible, and that is the word Bereshit in Genesis 1:1, Bereshit. Now, if you don't know Hebrew, that's okay. I am going to start by reading the Hebrew text, so even if you don't know Hebrew yet, you can at least listen to the text, get a sense of the sound of it. Those who are Hebrew students will do some grammatical analysis, but I'll try to do it in such a way that those who do not understand Hebrew grammar will be able to appreciate the sense of what we are doing. All right, so let's read the Hebrew text together for Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashmaim ve'et haaretz, verse 2, ve'haaretz hayita tohu vavohu, ve'choshech al pnei tehom, ve'ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim. Now slowly. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, ve'haaretz hayita tohu vavohu, ve'choshech al pnei tehom. V'ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim. Now, why is it that I read these two verses together? Well, the answer is quite simple. It is because grammatically, in Hebrew, they are one sentence. When we follow the rules of Hebrew grammar, verse 1 should not end with a period, but with a comma. Now, this has theological ramifications. For those who study Christian theology, you may have heard about the gap theory, and those who hold to the gap theory posit that the fall of Satan must have happened between the events described in Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. This cannot be the case, however, because Genesis 1:1 should not end with a period. And the reason why we know that is because verse 2 begins with a noun first and the verb second. In fact, those who know Palestinian Arabic know that when you start a sentence with the conjunction and, followed by a noun, it indicates that the clause is what we call a subordinate clause. In other words, it's a secondary idea in a bigger sentence. And so this is part of the reason why in recent years, many translators have correctly decided to translate the first word of the Bible not as in the beginning, but when God began. When God began to create the heavens and the earth, comma. The famed medieval Jewish exegete, Rashi, puts it this way, and I'm reading here from the Commentator's Bible. Concerning the phrase when God began to create, the first three words of the Hebrew Bible, Bereshit bara Elohim, he writes this: the text is not saying that heaven and earth were created first. If it were, it would have to say barishonah, which is how you say in the beginning in biblical Hebrew. Bereshit, the word that is actually used, only occurs in construct. Here too, the text must be understood as if bara were a gerund, not a past tense. At the beginning of God's creating. For a similar Hebrew grammatical form, see when the Lord first spoke to Hosea in Hosea 1:2, which literally means at the onset of the Lord's speaking with Hosea. What we find in Hosea 2 at the beginning of the verse, it says, Tchilat diber Adonai beHosea. Literally, Tchilat means the beginning of, diber, he spoke. Who spoke? Hashem, or the Lord, beHosea. So the beginning of the speaking of the Lord with Hosea, here, a verb that is typically used in the past tense is translated as a noun or a gerund. Speaking. The beginning of the speaking of the Lord with Hosea. when we come to Genesis 1:1, that's exactly what's going on. Bereshit, in the beginning of, bara, the creating of, Elohim, in the beginning of the creating by God, the heavens and the earth, comma. From an English language perspective, it sounds very awkward, but this works in Hebrew. And the reason why so many Bible translations translate this as, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, period, is because the early English translations, such as the King James Bible and others, mistakenly translated the Hebrew, but their mistaken translation was essentially canonized, as it were, and it came to be understood as the correct interpretation of the Hebrew when it really is not. So what is Genesis 1:1 saying then? When God began to create the heavens and the earth, verse 2, the earth was already tohu vavohu. It was essentially a mess, a barren wasteland. What does it mean by a barren wasteland? It means it was covered in water. And how do we know that? Well, it tells us as the verse goes on that it was a barren wasteland, tohu vavohu, and that darkness was upon the face of the deep. What is the deep? It's a word for the ocean. There's more to it than that, but at its core meaning is ocean. And the Spirit of God was hovering upon the face of the water, period. In other words, when God begins his creative acts in Genesis, there is already a water world. That begs the question, where did the world come from? Genesis 1 does not talk about it. And so whatever one chooses to believe about that issue, when we pay attention to the Hebrew, we are left to conclude that Genesis 1 is not interested in where the world came from. It instead is interested in the way the world and its inhabitants actually are now. And in a subsequent video, we'll get into the details of what Genesis 1 is really all about. But hopefully this is a good start to the discussion. I invite your comments and questions. Please leave them below. I'll happily respond to you as quickly as I'm able. And please let me know what other kinds of issues you'd like for me to address in the next video. If you've enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Click the bell below to be notified when future videos are published. And please be sure to share this video on social media and to leave a comment below. We'll see you next time.